How you doing?
Good. It's my new theme music. I like it.
Yeah, that's good. Birth of the Blues.
There you go. Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. We're outside in Nashville. We're with Brad Paisley. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
And we're in like a gear wonderland here. This is amazing.
This is our garage.
This is your garage.
Yeah, we took some AstroTurf from a CMA performance. When I did a song on there, they did this football-looking stage for me one year, and they gave us the roll of AstroTurf and said, "Take it." So I was like, "Well, let's put it on the wall."
Right. Yeah.
And it actually helps the sound in here a little bit.
There you go. It looks great. Well, this is very cool. I want to talk about all of the toys that you have gathered here. There's just so much great stuff. But I have to tell you, I was cracking up last night. I was watching the video for Bucked Off.
Oh, right.
It just totally cracked me up. Now, where did the idea come from to have people actually send in their breakup videos?
I just thought, if I'm going to illustrate the song and what it means, there's a couple of ways to do that. One is with rodeo footage, and the song is a metaphor for what happens to a bull rider most of the time, and also what happens to men on dates most of the time. I think we strike out probably a lot more than we.
The batting average isn't real high.
Yeah, it's not good. But I just thought, let's see if anybody has any testimonials they want to offer on a lighthearted look at their dumping, getting dumped.
That was great. It was a very, very entertaining video that suits the song well. So
Thank you.
That was very cool. So tell us about the process of writing a song like that. Do you start with the title? Do you start with a lyric? Do you have a musical idea in mind, or where does that come from?
With something like that, it was the musical idea kind of paired with the metaphor. It's playing on some of the early rodeo country music that I really like, and I'd never done a rodeo song before, so I thought it would be a lot of fun to come up with some sort of new metaphor that's a little less graceful. Like when you think about somebody like George Strait, and you think of the great songs he had about "I Can Still Make Cheyenne" and "Cowboy Rides Away" and things like that. It was such a graceful look at that lifestyle and relationships, and in this case, I was like, my style would probably be more to get, to land in the dirt,
right,
really hard.
Right.
And so we kind of had fun sort of making the song feel at times like it's a really retro 80s. It's got some of that sort of stratty, what Reggie Young used to do on the records in the 80s in country, in the channels before the choruses, and then the choruses are kind of rocking, and it's that lick that. And that lick actually came from, I was actually originally playing it real country, which is like. And we had that. And my producer on that, Dan Huff, said, no, cowbell, this is a rodeo, ride that bull,
Right.
And it was that. And gave it more attitude, which was the right thing to do.
A little bit more aggressive.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're working with a collaborator like a producer like Dan Huff, or you've worked a lot with
One of the best guitar players ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Frank Rogers you worked with a lot.
Right.
And
not
also,
one of the best guitar players ever.
No.
But great guy, amazing producer. But
so what do you look for a producer to do for you?
I want them to rein me in where I need reined in and let me run where I should run. And that's always good, because I think as guitar players, I would have a tendency to make a record that's more of a clinic.
Right.
No one but a bunch of geeks like us want to listen to that. Just the all of that stuff. So
Right.
So the idea of like, I think back on coming up with licks for records, and you have a song, and what do you do with it? Like how does the guitar become an extension of the voice? And with a lot of these, and the lyric, by the way, a lot of the songs, I always love it when we find something that feels like what we're trying to say lyrically. Mm-hmm. And I think back to, like, one of my favorite intros ever was something like "Waiting on a Woman," which was that the song itself was already finished and perfect lyrically. It was written by Win Varble and Don Sampson, and that song, the demo I had was kind of very traditional demo, which was the sitting on a bench at West Town Mall, He sat down his overalls and asked me. And so we were in the studio messing with things, what do you do that's both something that feels like me on a guitar and also unique to the song that you wouldn't want to hear that song without that? And somehow stumbled on with a little delay on it.
Right.
And it just became that. And that's when a producer's at his best, when he can bring that out of me.
Right, right.
Because it's in there, and I don't know if I can always find it myself.
Right, right. That song is a great example of Andy Griffith was in the video with you,
right.
and you've had so many different guests and collaborators, Timbaland, Mick Jagger, John Fogerty, Snoop Dogg.
Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning, exactly.
Right.
In fact, I watched the video of you giving him a cowbell lesson, right?
Yeah, we did a version of the video, and actually I'm going to do another one coming up too, where I re-edit too, where he's playing the cowbell in it, which is,
right.
That's
awesome.
He's amazing. His sense of humor is off the charts.
Right, that's fun. So tell us what it's like, not what it's like necessarily, but how you work with a collaborator like that. Do you go in with the song completed?
No, not always. I mean, somebody like Dan Huff, who's been doing this latest record, with something like Bucked Off, it's a great example of like the original demo that I had cut with the band was. It's been a great ride, that sort of, that cowboy sounding thing. And when he gets in there with me, he starts to bring out, he's like, okay, we're gonna break it down. You do this by yourself on the guitar, drums in, that. He's telling everybody what to do. And then the same with when you do the solo, actually that's a great example of he let me run. Mm-hmm. And my instinct on the solo would have been, you get back on, and I think I originally had done like an, kind of thing,
right.
Really simple. And he's like, no. You get back on. He's like, open that gate. Let's see that bull ride.
Right.
So I was like, that kind of thing. And he's like, yes. And I'm like, are you sure that's not too crazy for this? And he's like, no, you need that.
Right.
He's like, make it hard for the guitar players to learn. At that point. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So when you approach a solo like that, or any of your solos for that matter, are you thinking target notes in the chords? Are you thinking scales? Are you thinking shapes?
You're giving me too much credit for thinking. Sometimes, I always try to, I've been struggling with one thing that we just cut that's brand new that no one's heard yet, that's a ballad, and speaking of these things, like trying to figure out the right notes, and I was struggling on the intro of it, because it's like, at some point you run out of ideas that don't feel like they're on top of something else. And what's the right simple couple of notes that become something? And for something like, when I think back to something like She's Everything, which was with a Strat, but it's like, that is like, that's so simple now, but I can't play that song without it. But that's gone forever. Mm-hmm. Like, can't use that again.
Right.
And I try to find if there's a melody that you can grab from later in the song that can become the intro as well. I think that's always a good idea.
Sure.
Sure. Like, what's the hook of the song, and does that become something in the intro of the song or not? And sometimes that doesn't work either. So I'm not sure what the math is on some of these things. For me, it's trial and error.
Is that the same if you're doing something more like Mr. Policeman or something where there's
that's kind of that was like what would be cool, what feels like a police chase.
Right.
Sure. Because that's the prototypical rockabilly thing. That's not your intro. You can't do that.
Right.
Everybody's done that. So it's like, what's the other lick? Or something like instrumentals are a good example of that. Like, that's the hard one, is when you're writing something like, say, Nervous Breakdown. When you're doing that, it's kind of that's its own beast because there is no melody. That's the melody.
Right.
Then where do you go?
Right.
But I think in terms of, I always like the sound of things on a guitar snapping. Does that make sense?
Sure.
That whatever that is. And so I always gravitate, whether it's, you know, or that, you know. Or, you know, that snap. And that's why there's probably a lot of pull-offs, a lot of open strings, a lot of grabbing, using your middle finger to snap that thing. And somebody, you know, with you today was saying, why your action's high. That's because I play way too hard, probably. For
You get that attack, though, right? You get you're digging in with the pick.
My classical teacher in college would say, no, whoa, wait, what are you doing? You're going to break that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's part of your tone, too, is that bottom end tightness that you have to make that translate and come across.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, and Bill Crook, who's built a lot of custom guitars for me over the years, like, somebody asked him, they were surprised that I don't use really, really hot pickups necessarily on a lot of these. Like, this is, like, the pickups in these are about 7K, I believe. Right, Dave? Yeah. And they're like, he doesn't use, like, 10? It's like, no. He's like, you don't understand. He plays through British cathode biased AC30-ish amps and Dr. Z amps, which are really based on that iconic thing that they discovered in the 60s, which was, oh, you know, the cathode bias thing sounds really good. And it's not an efficient thing, but it's the best sounding to me, to my ear. And when you're plugging into one of these, you can distort them immediately with the wrong things. And so how do I somehow manage that? And I think that another aspect, you say, you know, there's some girth to the low notes and stuff. It's how you set it. It's how you play it. It's in the hands. I mean, you know, playing something differently, like playing something like the Ticks intro without snapping it. It sounds like that, or it's... You know, that's it's all in that.
It's a different articulation.
Yeah, and it makes the amp, you can hear the amp's not the same amp if you're going... It's just kind of...
Right. Part of that is the cathode bias tubes, the way they kind of squash, but it's also the Alnico speakers. I'm assuming that's what's in this.
It is, yeah. We've actually got, I think that's blues in that. And Z and I work really good together on these amps that we build. His, first of all, suit me anyway, even the ones he builds for other people. But the ones that he and I have collaborated on, like the Z-Rec and the DB4 to be renamed later, and the you know, things like the Stangray, and this is a new one that maybe we'll hear today, Z80. These are all things that suit that kind of thing. And the amp gives back. It's not just taking, you know, it's not just taking what you're doing. It is actually feeding the player, because it makes you play different when the amp responds. And that, in the best case scenario, whether that's blues music or country or anything like that, the amp becomes a part of the equation and does dictate how I play quite often.
Well, you said that the amp is the most important, then it's mic placement, and then it's guitar, as far as the equipment goes
so.
in terms of the tonal equation.
Well, it's all, Ken Fisher always said that, you know, with Trainwreck. He was always like, a great amp and a crappy guitar could be the greatest thing you've ever heard. Crappy guitar, you know, or, you know, great guitar through a really crappy amp, I don't know. Might not work. Might not say, might as well have a, you know, bad guitar.
Right. To circle a little bit back more toward the playing, one of the things I've noticed watching you play is you tend to play along the neck more. You don't look like a box player to me, especially double stops and runs that you're doing up and down the neck. Talk a little bit about how that influences what you play, viewing the neck that way versus up and down.
Well, I'm all about, like, I see it like a canvas and it's painting. Like, why would you, like, if you're gonna do like a, you know, there's only so much you can, you're gonna run out down there. So, you know. And it's just more interesting. Whatever creates the more colorful picture is, I think where I gravitate.
So clearly you've studied the neck and you know where the notes are. You know what you're grabbing in there.
Well, I know this neck like the back of my hand. What is that? Never mind.
Never mind, yeah. Right. But you also studied jazz early on and got
Yeah,
kind of into that.
quite a bit.
Does that influence what you look for in the non-pentatonic, the non-major scale notes that you're reaching for?
Yeah, because the thing is, I don't know. I'm not a theory nerd to any degree, but I realized early on, if I want to kind of be able to paint all these things I want to paint with this instrument, I needed to know things that take me way beyond the comfort zone. Because you can play country and to some degree, some aspects of rock without knowing, your augmenteds and diminished chords and runs and whole tone scales or anything like that. It's like, but you're going to be limited. It's going to be. Or then you listen to somebody like Robin Ford and you realize it's like, oh, he really knows his stuff.
Right.
I better learn a little of that. So you go figure out what that person studied, and you find out he goes way back on all of the jazz stuff. And it's like, and you realize it's like all these little half steps.
Right.
It's Miles Davis was right. There's no wrong notes. It's just. And I've always said country, some of that great like Jerry Reed stuff and Chet stuff and all of that, it's just jazz on the back pickup.
Right.
Because it's like if you go, that's jazz, or country.
Right.
Why is that? It's like. And I don't like being lost. So it's like you start to figure out, it's like, well, if I can solo over something like the like Caravan, or if you can do something over top of like Cannonball Rag. That's not 1-4-5, so it's like. You get that sort of, you're not lost.
Right.
And then you start to realize, oh, some of that works even if it's 1-4-5. You can get away with, there's nothing like hearing a record where a guitar player plays a note that you think might be wrong for a second, and then they move it, and it's like, oh, I like that just took me somewhere. And you're not going to do that if you don't sort of study outside the little box that you want to play in.
Right. It's that idea of adding tension and release.
Yes, exactly.
You mentioned Robin Ford is so good at that with the diminished
So
chord on
good
the
at
5
that.
chord, right? He always brings in that diminished flavor to it that
Yeah,
he can bring back.
It's nuts what he does. He thinks so differently. We've done a couple of gigs together. Some of my most fun things are things like that where he and I played here at the Cannery. We set up both of our bands, and I would do a song, and he would do one. I'd do one of my songs, he'd do one of his, and we each played on each other's.
Oh, nice.
And my band played mine, his band played his. By the end of the night, we're just all playing. And that was insane.
Oh, that'd be crazy.
It was great.
That's
it was
so
really,
fun.
really loud, too.
Yeah, I bet. That's awesome. So you have talked about how John Jorgensen in particular influenced your
Without
choice
a
of
doubt.
amps and your tone, and John's, of course, a friend of ours at Sweetwater as well. Tell us a little bit about that. What was it that attracted you to what he was doing?
So here it is. It's 1988, and everybody's got a rack with a preamp and whatever stereo chorus effects you could get in a rack, and speaker cabinets and power amp. and it's that thing. It's that 80s thing.
Sure.
Which, looking back now, that's kind of cool too. But for a while, I was so tired of that. And then this guy comes through Wheeling, West Virginia, playing for the Desert Rose Band, and they're playing. Or, hello, trouble. Come on in. And I'm like, what the hell is that sound? because it wasn't that plinky, overcompressed chorus thing. It was somewhere between the Beatles and Don Rich. So I studied everything about him. I learned everything he did. Then the Telecasters come along. I learned all that. You know, and it's like, that's what I wanted to be.
Right.
I just wanted to be him. And it's so funny because online, I remember a few years ago on a chat room, well, maybe it was even in the beginning, somebody was asking me some questions about what to do to get the tone. And I'm like, just go do what I did and rip off John Jorgensen. And somebody wrote back, oh man, he totally stole his tone. and it's sort of like true. I owe John everything that way.
Right. And you got to work with him on Play, right?
Oh yeah, we're good friends now, and I adore him, and it's one of the greatest guitar players of all time in any format, but in country, I mean, he's an amazing beast, and it's crazy how, to me, he was such a unique way of thinking, to be out on the road with amplifiers that he's told me about these stories of, they were always breaking, and he'd have to learn to fix them himself because no one knew how to touch a Vox amp back then.
Right.
They were like, what is this thing? Why is this all, why are the tubes working together? Why aren't they shutting off? You know, and,
Right.
and he's like, this is the sound I like.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play it.
Right.
And anyway, so yeah, it heavily influenced how I pick some sounds here and there.
Right. So one of the things that stands out when I listen to your playing is you use a lot of delay, but you use it subtly.
Yeah.
It doesn't overtake things, and you've got like three or four different ones that you use for different things, right?
Yeah, totally. I always like, the thing about these amps, they don't have reverb, many of them. A lot of the Z's, like the ones I like the best don't have reverb.
Okay.
There's something about the aggression of an amp that's like, it's like country's 3 chords and the truth, and this amp is like 3 preamp tubes and a power section. That's it. It's like that kind of
Simple.
yeah, and then your signal doesn't get degraded that way, but then it's dry. I mean, like here, without delay on this, it's a good sound. It's its own thing. It's its own thing. But I don't know what that sounds like on tape because the mic's right in front of the cabinet. But I know in the room that's kind of nice. But on tape and out on a PA and on a record especially, that's its own thing. That is a microcosm.
Right.
Or there's a room. You just feel the room a little more.
Right. The trick though is to get that set so it's not in your way when you're playing.
Yeah.
It doesn't turn into a wash.
Totally, because you can imagine, like if I do delay, like the mix is there, we'll go up here. That's too much, unless you want that. It's like a bathroom.
Right.
But if you get back to that. Just enough.
Right. Right.
And when you think about some of the, like I was talking about the snap thing, that's part of the sound of what I do, I think. Like I did a couple models in those Fender modeling little amps.
Sure, Mustangs.
There was a couple Paisley, like rockabilly delay type settings that I did, and it was just that. It was basically a British amp with that thing, and that. It's whether it's the Celebrity intro. That's part of the sound of it.
Right.
Not the biggest part, but a part.
It sounds like, though, just standing here listening to it, the delay's a little darker than the dry signal. Do you roll some of the high end off so it isn't getting
It just
cluttery?
depends on the one that you pick.
Okay.
Like I like that's the Ethereal, a Wampler delay right there, which also has, I don't have it on it, but it has reverb. Listen to this. So it's got verb on the delay in the thing, which is that's a great pedal. Which I don't need verb with the delay I'm doing. But you can imagine where if you do that as a long sort of delay, like if it's this. That's very Pink Floyd. But
yeah, there you go.
But yeah, I think that delay should have some character to it. One of my favorite old delay is the DD2,
Which was a low resolution digital, right?
8-bit. Yeah. So it's not what you'd call like dark, but it's not thick either. It's like it's lo-fi,
right,
in its own way. It's got a little snap to it. The other thing about the DD2 pedal that I like is there's a little bit of compression in it somehow. And I don't use a compressor.
Right.
Most people are like, what kind of compressor do you use? It's like, I don't. I just really play hard and the amp does it.
Right. Yeah, the amp and the speakers. So on that delay, it's almost like the way that you think of an Echoplex, the way that delay degrades each time it comes back around. With that 8-bit resolution, it kind of does the same thing, right?
I think that's true, and as well as the fact that it's a little bit roomier in a way, because if you think about it, whatever's happening in this room right now, the delays are not, anything naturally occurring doesn't have the full spectrum of what's coming out of that amp.
Right.
It's got its own little thing. So delays some of these digital delays that are sort of full res, big, it doesn't sound right to my ear. It doesn't feel like a room.
I hear this one even. The low end is dropping off as when you're doing the longer repeats. You can hear it kind of even with the ear.
Yeah, right. Turn that verb off, yeah.
Yeah, when it was a little.
Yeah, hear that? Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, it sits perfectly, but just behind what you're playing. So you mentioned the effects of the room on what you're doing. When you're in the studio, do you go for close miking? Do you do room miking? Is it a combination of all those?
Combination. Upstairs, I have a guitar room, and there's this crazy room that the people that owned the house before me made. I don't know if it was supposed to be a powder room or something, but it's the strangest design of like walls going like this and some beams in the middle and a little cabin or a little cabinet area and it's no square walls, and that's where I close mic everything.
Okay.
And then there's a bathroom it's about a 20-foot ceiling, and it's about this wide. It's the worst master bath of all time. It's only this wide, and the shower at the end, and it's about a 1-second verb.
Wow.
And so we put a stereo room mic in there and close mic the amps out in that room, and it feeds right into that, and I'm able to mix in as much as I want of that.
Right.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you and I were talking at Summer NAMM, 2 Summer NAMMs ago, about your signature guitar, we were talking about how you control top end from a Telecaster, because it can get really bright. Do you choose ribbon mics? Do you go for dynamic mics?
Combination. Now in the studio upstairs, I use an SM57 on the close mic let's say it's a Vox Blue and a Z cab. It would be like, I used this on the last album a lot, and that was basically where that mic is. See that tape?
Yep.
That would have been live. That would have been 57 there. In the studio, there'll be I don't know the model. What's that big peanut mic?
Oh, the RCA.
RCA. There's an RCA ribbon mic that goes on the other speaker. So those two do that.
Okay.
And you're able to that way, like that speaker's got that thing, that thump, and I can put a little of that in it if need be. Usually like a 57 on it.
It works, right?
I'm pretty much there, as long as I have some room mic or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just kind of always works.
Yeah.
Right. So we were talking a little bit earlier, mentioning the guitar. This is one of your signature guitars. This one has an interesting twist going on it.
This is, this has the G bender that Joe Glaser designed in it, which is a really unique piece. And you've picked this up before, and you can see it doesn't add any weight, which is crazy. He uses a lot of the interior of this as things like cables and aluminum, and so it doesn't. It's crazy. And then it's got this great mechanism here that is a single as opposed to, he used to have to do a single like thing here, but this is one saddle just in the center, just like a Tele, made out of brass, which is something about the magic of that, you know, with the Tele and brass saddles, especially the older ones like that, the 50s. But you have this piece where it's just a little route about the size of a, I mean, it's smaller than the cube you charge your cell phone with, you know, like an Apple phone, you know, one of those chargers. That's bigger. That's bigger than the route of this. Yeah, it's small. It's like a square. And you can take this saddle and decide, you have to decide ahead of time. You can't do it mid-show or something, but do you want a B or a G? So I use a G almost all the time. So if you wanted to use the B, this flips over and goes on this side. And you can do a B bender or a G bender, whichever you prefer.
Right. For those who aren't familiar with the way these work, can you give us just an example of what it does?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, it's like, that's the Jimmy Olander was who got me into it. He used the B and a G, but he used the G heavily, so it was it was like, bends the note a whole step. Being that it's the G, I like what that does because it's a thicker string than the B. The historic B that you hear is stuff like the Eagles, you know, what Bernie Leadon did, or Clarence White, and also Skaggs and Steve Wariner, and those guys all use a B, which is a higher string. And when you do the B, it's more of the that, or for me it'd be. It gives you, it's funny, it's like people say, well, that's pedal steel licks, but it's not. When it's the lower, like the G like that, it doesn't sound as steel-like to me.
Right, I agree. Yeah.
Which is its own thing.
Yeah,
so.
Sure. So it's basically the strap attaches to a lever on the back that pulls the string tighter to raise that pitch, and you push the neck down to it.
Yeah, it basically bends this, I don't know if you can see it, but it bends that. See that mechanism? It bends it just ever so
and the string latch is right in the front there. That's really cool.
Yeah, and the string goes right there.
Oh, I see. Wow.
So it's bizarre.
Smart.
Yeah,
very
really
cool.
good.
So we were also talking about your perhaps most play guitars are 68 Teles.
Yes.
And you've been finding a few more of those and working on those late 60s Teles. What is it about that era of Telecaster that works for you?
Well, one, hey Dave, bring over La Brea. Let's see it. So this one's pretty nuts. Check this out. I think I'm one of the few artists that had a signature model before I was born. Yeah, this is 1968, and this guitar, Bill Crook, the great luthier up in West Virginia, that old friend of mine, he makes incredible Paisley guitars. And what's interesting about it is I had seen some, you know, over the years, everybody refinished Paisley Teles. They didn't like it. James Burton hadn't done his thing yet, and everybody thought, what a terrible idea were these. And then I went into Chicago Music Exchange and said, hey guys, you got a 68? Because I think it would be poetic justice to take a 68 Tele and turn it into a Paisley as opposed to the other way around.
Right.
They said, yeah, we got a black one. Just refinned, just came in. So I bought this guitar, which had sort of bad black paint all over it. But the neck felt great. And I said, well, I'll get this. It sounds good. So I get it. Pickup wasn't any good in it. It was not the original or anything. And I sent it off to Bill Crook, who called me and said, you're not going to believe what's underneath of that black paint. And sure enough, what you see right here was under that black paint. And it all came off. It was like something that came off pretty easily with acetone. And all he had to do was refinish the sides. And you can see, if you look really close, like there's a little black left in that nick. Right there. There's a black speck on the back right there. See that? Didn't come off.
That's crazy. That is
Other than
crazy.
that, I mean, that's insane. And, and so I call it La Brea, like the tar pits.
Yeah, sure, there you go.
And this has a pickup that Seymour Duncan actually specifically made for this guitar. And we, I think he may sell it, called La Brea, you know.
Is it a little hotter than the pickup that's in the Signature?
No, I think it's about the same. It may be higher up, closer to the strings on this, but I don't know.
That sounds killer.
It's a great pickup.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's gonna make that, and then we're working on it, cooking up a few things like that.
Yeah, been doing some refinishing on some.
I've done I got a old. I started down the road of I had a couple of 52. I had a 52 and also a 51 body and guitar that I found a great old no-caster. There's some interesting stories that we'll have to tell another time because they're too long, but that had been gutted, and so I have a woodworker that has worked on a lot of stuff for me, and I said, do you think you could replace the ash in the middle of this body, and here's the route, and here's what it's got to be original. He's like, yeah, I could totally do that. And he did it. Before he was done, you could barely tell where there wasn't that. And then I started thinking about like what to do with it, and started reading the stuff and looking at Dan Erlewine on Stu Mac and all that, and thinking, you know what? I think I could do this. So I went out to the barn and breathed a lot of nitro fumes.
Right.
Yeah, no, but anyway, I started kind of experimenting with how do you make these things look old a little bit, and it's been fun. I'm by no means the best at it, but
right. Oh, that's cool.
It's been fun to do.
Ones we've seen here look great.
Oh, yeah, I've done a couple. Yeah,
Yeah.
You know, people would maybe not know the difference, but
Right. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I've only really done the old guitars too, which I call it a rescue. It's like a dog rescue.
Right.
You know, these things are some of those old '50s Tellies. Those blackguards are just abused, and it's fun to try to get them back to spec.
Right. So is this era when the maple fingerboard was separate from the neck, or were they one piece necks in the late '60s on those?
You know, this was separate. They were in '68, but in '69, there's 2 years they did these. The '68s, like this one and also my main old Paisley Telly, are 2-piece necks. You know, maple fingerboard added.
Do you think that makes a big difference?
The '69s are the skunk stripe.
Right.
And that was Burton's. So
With the
does it make a
69?
difference? I think it's a difference. I think there is. I mean, I think they'll tell you. There's something about maple cap necks sound somehow slightly different than that. Maybe it's always that to me, it's the alchemy of this whole thing. It's how heavy's the body, how thick is the neck. They're all different.
Right.
How hot is the pickup? Those are all different, even the same day.
Right.
And when you combine all that, can you tell, like, the best way to be able to tell would take the exact guitar, play it, put a skunk stripe neck on it, and play it, and see. But
Sure.
who has that kind of time?
Right. Yeah, it's a subtle thing, right? Anyway.
Yeah.
But,
I like these, though. I mean, I like them both.
Sure. So when you're playing live and doing studio stuff, you frequently will combine amplifiers together.
Totally.
Play more than one. What is the advantage to doing that? What are you looking for out of that?
Well, coupling. It's like one amp covers a certain spectrum, and another amp of another kind, especially, fills in some of those gaps. So if you think about it, like sound waves are these things where the frequencies are popping. There's gaps in it. You know, you've heard everybody who has an amp says, well, this one has a lot of this, or it doesn't have a lot of this, or it doesn't have a lot of mids, or doesn't have a lot of high end, or what. So if you've got one that does, it's really fun to pair them up. Like we've been playing through this D before. This right here is called the Z80, and it is this is an amp that Z hasn't released yet, but he might. If you want to mic it up.
Is that a 212?
212, just like that.
Okay, so maybe I can just
Yeah, it's not bad. Right
get
there.
something like that.
Sure. This guy is it's something. It is like it's an 80 watt. It's based on, to some degree, the idea of the earliest designs of the AC100s before they became bass amps. It was like they were going to be bass amps, but they were originally just big AC30s. And this is a cathode biased EL34 amp. So it's like an interesting sound, yeah. And it's dirty right now, but and it's got this crazy sort of mid-range to it.
It's thick, isn't it?
It's really, it's the note, you know, and when you take what I typically play through like a Z-Rec or another Z-Amp and pair it up with this, it's crazy. It just becomes like in a large arena, you're gonna fill it pretty easy.
Right.
You know. And if you roll your volume back. Anyway, it's a great amp.
Yeah, even at 9 o'clock in there, it's got some hair already on that.
Oh yeah, it's already
starting
got a
Right.
lot of that.
Well, we're going to come back and talk some more about Dr. Z and these amps in another video. But before we wrap up here, I wanted to ask you about one other thing. I saw that you have a new thing you're working on called the Store.
Yes.
Tell us what that's all about.
Thanks for asking about that. It's based on a charity that we have been involved with in California, in Santa Barbara, called Unity Shop. But we came up with our own concept for Nashville, and what it is, people that fall on hard times and lose their job, or somebody gets sick in the family and you have medical bills you can't afford, there's that gap. It's that sort of between what you would call, and there's people who are in poverty, but then there is that struggle that is where you're really trying to make ends meet. And one of the things that goes out the window for these families when they fall on hard times is food.
Right.
I mean, you know, so we have a concept. It's called the Store, and what it is, it's a grocery store where everything's free. You have to qualify for it, but then when you do, for 1 year, you have a period of time where you can go in there, and that's where you shop. So that takes that worry away from your life.
Right.
And the second aspect of it is, let's say you have children. One of the worst feelings I would think in hitting hard times is the loss of dignity of your kids seeing you take a handout. Well, you take a kid to this place that we've come up with, and they go through the process in a shopping cart, see you pick out the food you're gonna eat, take it home, you check out, you just never exchange money.
Right.
The kid has no idea, and one of the reasons it's called the Store is we get to say, hey, we're going to the store.
Right.
And so it's a concept that I'm really excited about, and it's been great to see how Nashville's embracing it, and we're getting it up and running.
Right, and it's produce, and it's not just like come in and get your...
It's mainly healthy. I mean, it's supposed to be, it's not junk food. It's a grocery store. It's the things you should be eating.
Right. Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. We'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, we'll be watching, because that's an awesome thing. I'd love to see that spread to other cities. And
us too. That's our goal.
Is
Is we really feel the pressure to get it right, because if we get this right, it could be. Already some friends of mine in other cities are saying we want to do this, and I said, well, let us make the mistakes first, and then you can take it and run with it.
Right. Well, that's great. So. Brad, thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule. I know
You're welcome.
You're busy, but man, I could stay here and talk about gear with you for
Me
a
too.
few more hours.
And we will. You just won't see it on tape.
Yeah,
we'll be
exactly,
talking a lot longer.
Exactly. Fun stuff. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and your experience.
Appreciate it.
Great to see you again. And thank you for joining me here. We're outside of Nashville with Brad Paisley, and I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater.